turn the air conditioner unit off before I sat down. Let me do that so it doesn't come on during the middle of the talk and cause us some distraction. Alrighty, got that done. Just pulled my headset off. I'm a mess this morning. Okay, let's see if we can get ourselves back organized here. Alrighty, I'm back, and I'm sorry for that little distraction there. So I thank everyone for being with us today. Thank you. It's an absolutely spectacular day, spectacular time here in South Carolina. We're just starting to get into the summer. It's getting hot and muggy, that's for sure. As I said, the air conditioners are running. But it's beautiful. Everything is green. Everything's alive. We have had plenty of rain, and I know that our friends out west have had too much rain. We've had plenty of rain here, and everything is blooming. And I don't even know if you can hear coming in through the window, but the crows outside are just having a field day. I don't know what they're all excited about. But life is good. Life is alive. Life is thriving, and we are a part of that. We should celebrate that. We should enjoy that. Today, I want to talk about something that I know that, probably every book you've ever picked up and read on spiritual growth or read about spiritual growth has talked about. And it talks about detachment, detachment. And we talk about it, we read about it, we hear about it. I'm sure somebody probably has written a song or a poem about it, at least one or two. And what I invite you to consider today is that detachment is more than any of those things. It's good that we read about it. It's good that we talk about it, and we listen to talks about it, and we sing about it, and all of those things. But if we don't practice it, it doesn't do us any good. It doesn't do us any good. It's not the kind of thing that you can be an observer and, just kind of watch what's going on. It just reminded me of the story, and I'm sure I've shared it with you before, but hopefully you've forgotten it and it sounds new. But one time I was working in Las Vegas, and I was flying into Las Vegas to present a seminar in the following morning. And I arrived, I guess it was like 11:30 Las Vegas time when I arrived. And of course that made it like, 1:30 in the morning back on the East Coast where I left. So I was pretty tired when I got there. But I always like to check out the room where I was going to be working the following day and make sure everything was set up right, because in the morning when you arrive, it's not the time to be calling a hotel and telling them you want the room set up differently. So I asked at the front desk when I checked in if somebody would give me the key to the ballroom where I was going to be working, and they offered to take me there. And the reason they do that is in Las Vegas, it's a maze. I know many of you have been to the casinos, but it's a maze. You can't get anywhere, like from the front desk to the hotels. You can't get there without passing the slot machines at least twice. So this person from the front desk was leading me, and they took me, and we went by the roulette tables and turned left, and we went by the crap tables and turned right, and then we went by all the slot machines. And as they're heading towards this conference room, there was this little bar, a little short bar, maybe 30 feet long, and there was about a half a dozen people sitting there. It's 11:30 at night, and they're having their cocktails and talking. And we turned the corner, and just around the corner from the bar, just as we turned the corner, we entered this hallway, and it was a totally different world. Now we're back into a hotel, and there's a big glass wall there, and outside the wall is the pool area of the hotel. And this particular hotel, the pool area was made up to look like a beach. They had brought in truckloads of beach sand, which struck me as funny, bringing sand to the desert, but nevertheless they did. And it was made up to look like a beach. So the people who could, be going out to the pool, it would be like being at the beach. And we walked down this hall, and they took me in the conference room and let me look, and everything was set up the way I wanted it. I got to see how the stage was, and how the lighting was, and where the projector screen for my charts were going to be, and all the things that you have to do when you're presenting it. I went back to the room, and of course I had to backtrack my way back to the elevators, and I had to pass that same bar again, and I noticed the people who were sitting there and talking, and went by the slot machines and the roulette tables, and I finally found the elevators and got up to my room. So the next morning I got up early, like 5:30. I hadn't had much sleep at all. But I got up about 5:30 because I was going to meet a film crew there. The camera crew was coming in, and they were going to videotape this whole presentation, and we were making a training tape that we could take this tape and then send it out to people in the field who otherwise wouldn't be able to get into a room. So I'm winding my way back through, trying to remember the breadcrumbs of where I was the night before when I was so tired, and I found the roulette table. Said, oh, this looks familiar, and I turned left, and then I found the crap table. Said, oh, that looks familiar, and I turned right, and there's the slot machines. And now I'm feeling really good that I'm getting somewhere, and I get to the same little bar, this little short bar that was there that I passed the night before. And I look over and it's the same people. The same 6 people that were there at 11:30 at night are sitting there, and now it's 5:30 in the morning. They looked a little bit worse for the wear, for having been there. And now they've got bagels and cream cheese to go along with their cocktails. And I look up and they're watching the TV. And on the TV is a fitness show, and I know you've seen it. It's the one the guy is in Hawaii somewhere, and he's doing these exercises on the beach. And all these people were exercising with him, and you know the show, the drill, the 1 and the 2, and just give me 2 more, and all these kind of things, and everybody's moving like they're doing these exercises, and I stopped, and where I could stop, out of one eye I could see the TV set with the people on the beach doing their exercises. I could see the people sitting at the bar, kind of glued to the TV set through their bleary-eyed. And I could look out the window to the pool, which was made up to look like a beach. And it just struck me, that there's a difference between sitting at the bar, consuming cocktails and bagels, and watching people work out on TV, and just moving that extra 20 feet or that 30 feet out to the beach area they could have been working out themselves. So there's no benefit to just being an observer sometimes. There's no benefit to just watching it. You can watch people work out on TV all night long, and it's not going to do you a bit of good. You're going to have to get out there and practice. And this idea of detachment then is something that we need to take from, something from the theoretical, something from it's nice to hear about and it's nice to talk about, into, well, what is it and how do we do it? And if we're attached, how did we become attached? And if we're supposed to be detached, how do we become detached? And what happens if I become attached to the idea that I should become detached? Isn't that still being attached? And all these kind of questions that drive philosophers and students of theology just absolutely crazy. It's almost like the Buddhist koan, the Zen koan, the sound of one hand clapping, or what did your face look like before you were born? But can I become attached to being detached? And of course you can. I remember Lori and I were taking a class one time with a professor of Hindu philosophy, and he was very good. He was very, very sharp. And he says, now you've all heard that desire, which is kind of a form of attachment. Desire is the root cause of our pain and suffering, And of course I'm nodding as if I knew, yeah, sure, I've heard that. And he says, so we need to let go of all our desires. Yeah, I guess that's true. If desire is the cause of all our pain and suffering, then we need to let go of all our desires. He said, well, isn't the desire to be free of desires a desire that you should let go of too? And I went, hadn't thought through that one. He had me trapped. So we have to kind of understand what these things are: desire and attachment. And another term that sometimes goes with it, which is identification. There's a guru from the East who is quoted as saying, there's only one sin, and that sin is identification. Now, of course, sin is an error, right? It's not the traditional breaking law and you're going to get punished for it. Sin you want to think of as missing the mark, right? It came from archery. It's missing the mark. It's having an error. And the only punishment is the punishment that is caused by making the error. So if you put your hand on a hot stove, that's a mistake, and making that mistake will cause you to suffer unpleasant consequences. So this idea then that identification or misidentification or identification is the error, that attachment is the error, that desire is the error. These are the kind of things that we want to talk about a little bit today, and hopefully bring them into not only some perspective, but into some actionable tasks for us, some things that we can do. So not just, oh yeah, that's nice, that I heard about it again, but what can I do about that? And why should I do anything about that? And why is it important? So what we want to consider is, the first thing we want to consider is how we become attached in the first place. And then we can lead into, well, why is it important to let go of those attachments? And then how do we let go of those attachments? So each one of us, excuse me, each one of us, we kind of come into the world, I think it was Plato or Aristotle said, we come in as a clean slate, and then we start forming our opinions. I'm not certain that entirely that I agree with that. I mean, I understand that it makes a point, but as Dr. Holmes says, we are part of eternal life expressing itself. Our consciousness was somewhere before it got here. It'll be somewhere after it leaves here. And we probably come in, my view, we probably come into this world with some pre-existing beliefs, albeit below the level of consciousness, but nevertheless things that we come in believing, things that we're working through. Perhaps other teachings might call it karma, but things that are embedded in the consciousness that comes in with us. But we come in and we find ourselves as small infants. We kind of awaken. We kind of come into awareness in this lifetime. In whatever surroundings we find ourselves in, we tend to, as infants, as children, we tend to accept that as normal. I don't know about any of you, but the idea of questioning my childhood and questioning the beliefs of the people who raised me, my parents, my grandparents, the clergy, the teachers in the schools, and those kind of things. It never occurred to me to think that, well, gee, there's another way of thinking and maybe they're wrong. It just, that was the way it was, and that was right. That was our way, right? Our way of believing, our way of thinking. And we just kind of accept all of these things and absorb all of these things, and we assume that they're true. I think it was a Stoic philosopher who said that we receive our values at our mother's breast, with our mother's milk. It's very subtle, but we learn to accept these things, and we start to identify. We start to identify with these people. We start to identify with these ideas, and we start to become attached. And by becoming attached, they're ours. They're ours. And they're right. Our way of believing is the right way of believing. And if somebody tries to take those things away from us, we get angry, or if we lose some of those things. If somebody moves away from us, or they pass on all of those things, we feel a sense of loss, because something we were so attached to was such a part of us, something that we felt perhaps we needed, we had to have. It was no longer with us, and we were attached. And we never stopped to think, at least at that early age, I didn't, maybe you did, but I never stopped to think that there was another way. A different way, maybe even a better way. Just never stopped to think about it, never crossed my mind. It was George Bernard Shaw who said that patriotism is the idea that my country is the best country in the world by virtue of the fact that I was born in it. And that kind of struck home, but only struck home to me after I had the experience of travel. Right? Remember Mark Twain said that travel was detrimental to all forms of prejudice? Because we start to go out into the world, and we start to meet other people, and we find out that they're not at all like the stereotypes that we had, that we grew up with. All people from a certain country are not bad people, or necessarily good people, were thieves and all those kind of things, you know, and all of the things again, I don't know how it is where you grew up, but where I grew up, everybody had strong opinions about every other ethnic group that there was, you know, except theirs, of course. Theirs was perfect, whole, and complete. But by God, everybody else had a lot of work to do, you know. It's kind of like Archie Bunker on the TV show. One time his son-in-law was talking to him about religion, and Archie said, well, the church he went to was the right church, you know, the absolute right church. And the son-in-law said to him, well, how do you know it's the absolute right church? And he says, well, if it wasn't, I'd be pretty stupid to go there, wouldn't I? So kind of self-affirming, as we were talking a couple of weeks ago. You know, it's right because I say it's right. So we never start to question these things, you know, until we go out into the world and we start to meet other people. And in my travels and in my work, I started to realize that the young men who grew up in what was then Yugoslavia were just as patriotic as the young men who grew up in America, or the young men who grew up in Canada or France or Ireland or England or all the other places where I had the opportunity to work with people who came from those locations, you know, and started to realize through interacting with people and working with them that, you know, we're all human and we all pretty much wanted the same things when we could get down to it, you know, to love and to be loved and to raise our families and the very essential but very simple things of life. We're all very much the same. So we grow up and we adopt these ideas, and we are told, you know, very early on that this is the way that we do things. This is our way of doing things. And those people, they do things a different way, but they're not right. We're right and they're not right. And we especially in terms of religion, you know, we're told that our religion, whatever our religion happens to be, our religion is the right religion, and it's the right way of thinking about God. And other people, well, God bless them, they're just, you know, they're mistaken and they're wrong, and hopefully God will have mercy on them and forgive them. But you know, but they're wrong. They're wrong. And you know, I grew up kind of accepting that you know, what I was being told was the way, the right way, and the only right way. And it's kind of funny because when I started to do family history and I started to do genealogy, you know, what I found is that my ancestors came from many different religions, you know, many different ways of believing. Some of the ways of believing that when I was raised, I was told, well, those people are wrong. Those people from that particular religion, they just don't know what's going on. And then, of course, I find out that my second great grandfather or third great grandmother or somebody in the family was a practicing member of that religion. And my point is that these things that we identified with, these things that we became attached to, were only ideas. Only ideas. And they were ideas that were changing. If I had been born 100 years earlier, I probably would have been raised in that other religion. If I'm come back 100 years from now, if we do those things, I don't know. But if I did, I'd probably be in a different religion still. So we become attached. We become attached almost without our knowing, definitely without our consent. We identify with different roles as we go through life. You know, of course, as we come into life and we're a child, and we learn our sex and our gender. We learn those things early on. We're told you're a good little boy or a good little girl, for example. And we learn that there's a certain way for good little boys and good little girls in our culture to behave. There's certain things that we do, and there's certain things that we don't do. And we start to identify with that. We start to behave accordingly. I remember seeing it was kind of like a documentary, but it was a segment, and it was talking about how we become socially conditioned as children. And it showed little boys and little girls, and there was an experiment in psychology, and they showed these children images like on a TV screen or a TV monitor, and they were videotaping the child's reaction. And they showed them these images, and they were startling images, things that would surprise the children, things that might shock them, those kind of things. And up to a certain age, the boys and girls reacted both the same. When there was some shock or awe or surprise, their eyes lit up and their mouths went open, and they would go, wow, something like that. But after about age 3 to 4, when they got in there, the little girls would express the shock and the awe and the surprise the same as before, and the little boys would remain stoic. They wouldn't show any emotion. They wouldn't give any expression. And the person who made the film was saying it was because by that age, the little boys had learned that little boys in our culture don't do that. Little boys in our culture don't show surprise. They don't show shock. They don't express themselves that way. They keep their emotions to themselves. And it's only an idea, right? It's only an idea, and it's an idea that our children learn at a very early age. They learn that little girls are supposed to do something, little boys are supposed to do something else, and it's only an idea. It's only an idea. And of course now we grow up and we say, well, we've got to fight those ideas because that's not right. It's not right that they tell us that we can do this and can't do that simply because of whether we're a boy or a girl. But when we were children, we accepted that. When we were children, we accepted that because that's what we were told. So we adopt these little roles in our society. We are the child, and we think of ourselves as the child in the family. And people have done all these kind of studies about it. Depends on where you are in the birth order. Are you the first child, the last child, the middle child? We adopt different roles. We behave differently because our culture expects that out of us. And we become attached to that. We identify with that. We think, well, that's who I am. That's who I am. But we're not that. We're not that. That's an idea that we have accepted. That is something that we have learned. Probably not willingly, definitely not consciously, but it's something that we have learned. It's something that we have been taught. And what we've been taught, what we have learned, we can unlearn. We go off to school and then we adopt the identity of a student. And we're told what it means to be a good student and what it means to be a bad student, and somewhere we fit in that spectrum, and we behave accordingly. And we think of ourselves as a student. And we do what the teachers expect of us. If we're not, we can get into trouble. But that's why we get into trouble, because the system's designed to get us to conform to do what the teachers want us to do. And we go through that part of our life thinking of ourselves as a student and identifying with ourselves as a student. We grow older and we continue on in school, and eventually we go to work, we get a job. And when we get a job, we think of ourselves as an employee, and we identify with that. And we start to get the rules and regulations of behavior. Some are given to us expressly, in your code of conduct, and others you learn by watching which way the wind is blowing. How do the leaders in the organization behave? What does their behavior say about the way that I'm supposed to behave? But nevertheless, we figure out. See, we're constantly, from the time we come into the world, we're constantly trying to analyze what's going on and figure out how are we supposed to act, how are we supposed to behave. And we adopt all of these different identities as we go through life. We adopt these identities as a child, as a student, as an employee. We get married, we become a spouse, and we adopt the identity of a spouse, and we start to behave the way that we have been taught a spouse should behave. We become a parent, and we adopt the role of a parent, and we try to do the things that we think a parent should do. And we identify with ourselves as a parent. And we relate to all these things. We become attached to all these things, and they become kind of guiding guiding ideas in our lives that this is the way I behave because I am this. This is the way I behave because I am that. Engineers have a certain mindset and they behave a certain way because they're engineers. And all these things are simply ideas, and none of these things are who we are. None of them are who we are. And at some point in life, I think the earliest it starts is around 30, 28 to 30. But at some point in life, we start to question, we start to think a little bit for ourselves and say, wait a second. I've been living my whole life based on everybody else's idea of who I am and what I ought to do. But do I know who I am? Do I know who I am? Do I know what I ought to do? And usually that's when our spiritual quest begins. You know, if you think about what I'm saying here, and think about a time when you go to a social gathering. Maybe it's a work function, maybe it's not, but you go to a social gathering and people are introducing themselves to one another. And they may give you their name, and then they'll give you their job title. My name is Jim and I'm the director of this. I'm a manager at that. I'm a middle manager here. I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, all those kind of things. But is that who they are? If I ask you who you are, will you give me your name? Probably so, but that's not who you are, that's your name. That's something your parents gave you. It's not who you are, it's what you're called. So you're not your name. Who are you? You're not your job. Right? That's what you do. You're not your title. Through the years I've worked with people who insisted that they be addressed by their title. And I've worked with spouses of those people who insisted that they be addressed by their spouse's title. And of course I would do that for them out of politeness. But is that who they are? Their title? That's what they identify with, you see. That's their image of who and what they are. So we come to a point in life where we start to recognize that we are spiritual beings. See? And spirit is not a name. The Hindus call it the nameless one. We're told neti neti, not this, not that. Your name for God is not right. It's not this, it's not that. In China, we're told in the Tao that can be named is not the real Tao. So we start to realize that we're spiritual beings, and all of these different self-concepts, all of these different self-images that we've held about ourselves are not who we are. They are not the truth of who we are. We start to examine our lives and we realize that all of the attachments, all of the things that we thought were so important in life, making money, having job security, buying a house, buying a car, all of those things are not important. They are not who we are. They may be things that we use. They may be stuff that we have. They may be maybe our contribution to life, if you want to call it that. But they too are not who we are. And we become so attached to that. We become so attached to that I know that you've heard this many times, many places, perhaps in your own family, of people who work their whole lives and suddenly they're out of work, they're retired, or their company closes, and within a short time they're dead. They lost everything that they thought told them who they were. They lost their self-identity. So then we start to realize that, well, if I am a spiritual being, maybe I'm supposed to be discovering more of what that means. Maybe I'm supposed to be discovering more of what that is. Because isn't that more real than the temporary things in our lives? The titles we hold, the names we have, the bodies that we inhabit, the stuff that we collect. We're a curious society, and I doubt any one of us can drive more than a mile without passing a self-storage place or two or three. They're like temples to our addiction to stuff, you know. We got all this stuff that we can't get away, can't give it away. We can't part with it. I remember one time we were moving and I had to put stuff in temporary storage, and the guy said, "Do you want to take insurance out on it?" And I laughed. I don't know that anything that I was putting in storage was worth the cost of insurance. I couldn't give it away because I hadn't looked through it yet. There might just be that one little thing in there somewhere that was important that I wanted to keep. But I knew most of it was junk. So we have these shrines to our addiction to stuff that we're attached to. And we start to recognize then as we want to grow spiritually, we start to recognize then that the things that we are attached to are like anchors to a ship. They're holding us back. You know? We're trying to move forward. We're trying to move forward in whatever we consider to be our spiritual growth. And yet we're being held back. And in ancient Rome, they had a god, Janus, who was two-faced. And one, you know, if you see the statue, it's got one face looking to the left and one face looking to the right. And the idea was that this god represented the past and the future. One face was looking backwards and one face was looking forward. And when we start to enter that stage of our lives where we recognize that we are spiritual beings and we want to look forward to growing spiritually, we want to look towards that. It's kind of like we think, well, in the past I was human, and in the future I will be divine. And I'm stuck right here in the middle, and I don't know what to do. If I try to go back to being completely human, that spark of divinity in me gnaws at me and tells me this is not who you are. This is not the truth. These are roles that you adopted. These are things that you identified with. These are ideas that you have become attached to, but they are not who you are. And we're not happy. We're not happy trying to go back and do things the old way. To me, it's kind of like the midlife crisis. You know, people get to a certain age and they think, well, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. You know, this is not at all the way that I thought life was going to be. When I reached this age in my life, I was going to be this, that, and the other thing, and it's not at all like that. And I'm not happy. So the way that they deal with their dissatisfaction is they try to go back and recreate the experiences of the times of their life when they were happy. You know, they try to go back and get the job they had years ago. Have you ever seen the movie? There's a movie, Kevin Spacey's in it. I think it's called American Pie, where he's a middle-aged man. He gets laid off and he goes back to working in a burger house because that's the job when he was 16, and that was the happiest year of his life. And I think, you know, the movie is kind of poking fun at that. They're just poking fun at, we try to go back and recreate the circumstances from 30 years ago, thinking that somehow it was the circumstances that made us happy. Maybe we'll get a sports car. You know, maybe we'll take up a new sport or things that we did years ago. So that doesn't work. See, we're stuck in the middle, and we're trying to figure out, if I go back to a happier time in my life and reinvigorate the ideas that I had then, the things that I identified with then, that somehow I'm going to be happy. And I can't be happy, you see. Because those were only ideas. Those are only attachments, and those attachments are never going to make me happy. And if I try to move forward, if I try to say, well, I am a divine being, and I need to start living my life as a divine being, then that human part of us from the past keeps hanging on, and it keeps telling us, well, yeah, but you're not there yet, you see, and you still need to live as a human being until you get to be a divine being. And if we completely try to ignore the fact that we are here and we are human, then we're not fulfilled either. We're stuck in the middle, you see. We're stuck in the middle. We're kind of like, now, now is the chaos. Now is the confusion. Now we don't know who we are. Now we don't know who we are. So we might become attached to the idea that we must completely detach from everything. Everything. We must completely detach from it. Completely become the empty vessel. Completely become detached. And we try to do that. And we're not entirely certain how to do it. We're not entirely certain. And then it becomes important to understand, first of all, why we need to do what we're doing, and then how to do what it is that we want to do. So why it is important for us to detach from the old erroneous ideas is, as I said, they are the things that are holding us back. At some point in our life, those are the things that are holding us back. And in general, if you just look at human life in general, we will typically find that those things that made us successful, that brought us as far as we have come, if we hold on to them for too long, then they will no longer serve us. In fact, they will hold us back. We look at organizations. We look at executives in organizations. We will find there are times that they have done things that were wildly successful, and they move to another organization and try the same thing, and it doesn't work. And of course, the problem is they didn't know why it was wildly successful, and in one organization it wouldn't work in the other. They just thought it was whatever they did. But there's a time where maybe being very focused or results driven and being very competitive might serve people to get them, to the point where they rise up in an organization. But then there comes a time when collaboration and cooperation are more important than competition, and those people fail because they hold on to the very thing that got them there, their ability to compete. And they don't understand that the thing that got them so far, the thing that they're very good at, is now time to let go of. And we kind of realize in our own life then that we have been wildly successful to some degree in that we're all here. We've all arrived at wherever we are. But the things that we are attached to are going to hold us back. The people we are attached to are going to hold us back. The materials, the goods, the services that we are attached to are going to hold us back. And even the very ideas that we are attached to are going to hold us back. So we say, how then can we do this? It's important to do it because if we are ever to experience ourselves as the divine beings that we are, the individualized expressions of God that we are, we have to let go of those limiting ideas that we learned as children and students and employees and spouses and parents and all of the things that society told us, because none of that is who we are. None of that is what we are. So how do we let go of those things? And how do we avoid becoming attached or obsessed with the idea of attachment? And there's a couple things that I want to offer. And the first thing is that we must learn to become the witness. We must learn to identify with the witness. So we have been more or less, the best analogy I can use, it's been like we've been having a dream. So you go to sleep at night and you have a dream, and in that dream you believe it's real, and you become attached to that dream. You are one of the characters in the dream. In fact, you are all the characters in the dream, but you accept yourself as one, and you look at the other characters and you think that they're someone else, and they're not. They're all creations of your own mind. It's all a little drama that's played out in the screen of sleep, and yet we believe it's real. See, yet we believe that is actually happening, and it's actually real, and it's actually important. Sometimes we wake up in the morning and realize that we were having a dream and decide we want to go back to sleep to see how it ends. As if it was going to run its course without us dictating it, without us creating it. we're we're hooked into the idea that it is real, and it is not real. And if we could learn how to become an observer, which, by the way, Wednesday night we're going to talk a little bit on Skype about a documentary on lucid dreaming, which is about becoming aware and lucid while you're dreaming. If you could become aware of the fact that this was only a dream, then you could identify with the observer. Then you could observe what was going on. You could, as we're taught in some meditation techniques, you could be the observer. You could be the witness. So consider this. I want you to consider this. As you were growing, as you were the infant, as you were the school child, as you were the employee, as you were the spouse, as you were the parent, as you were having all of these different experiences, there was one that was observing, there was one that was witnessing, there was one that was never changing. And that is closer to the truth of who you are than any of those dramas that were playing out in the field of consciousness. So that 5-year-old child that was going to school for the first day, that we all remember what it was like going to school for the first day, we're not that child. Right? That child is gone. We remember it as if it was us, but we are not that child. But we are the one who was there to witness and to observe that experience of that child going to school for the first time. And there was a witness there when that young adult went to work for the first time, and there was a witness there when that person got married and became a parent. So there's a continuity of consciousness that has outlasted the form. We're not the form. The body that was that little child going to school is no longer here. It is gone. It's turned to dust long ago. But there's a continuity of consciousness that is the consciousness of the witness or of the observer. So the first technique that I want to give you is, instead of getting caught up in the drama and thinking this is happening to me, think to yourself, I am the one observing. I am the one observing. So somebody comes up to you and tries to insult you, they don't even know who you are. They're trying to insult your form. And your form is in the process of turning to dust anyway. So they're not insulting you. Whatever's going on is inside them. It has nothing to do with you. Don't get caught up in their stuff, you see. Practice becoming detached, and you can do this in meditation as well. You can sit and you can observe your thoughts as your thoughts come and as your thoughts go. Oh, look, there goes a thought. Much different than saying, I am having a thought. Oh, look, there goes a thought. If it's an angry thought, oh, look, there goes an angry thought. Instead of saying, I'm angry, oh, look, there goes an angry thought. Learn how to detach. Learn how to become the observer. The second technique is, as I said, think of everything as a dream. Just pretend it's all a dream. This is all a dream. None of it's real. It's all a projection of consciousness, which it truly is. And I don't have to get caught up in it. It's not as real as it seems. I can choose to act differently. I can choose to think differently. I can choose to behave differently. And then the last thing to consider is to allow your consciousness to move to a place beyond thought, beyond perception, to a place of beingness. And this may take some practice, and this may take observing the thought. And then I can say, well, am I observing the thought? Or am I observing the one observing the thought? We detach another level. We move back another level. We watch thoughts come up as if they're coming up on a screen, a projector screen in our mind. And we recognize that they are nothing. That there is a place in experience that is before thoughts. So we won't get entangled with the thoughts. We won't identify with the thoughts. We won't attach ourselves to the thoughts. We just let them come and we let them go. And then after a while, we're not so aware of them. And we are just aware of being. Just being. There's a story that I was reading this morning in one of Osho's books, and I'll close with this. And he was talking about a young man who came from a long line of priests in the Hindu culture, Brahmins. And he went off to school and he took all the lessons, learned how to be a Brahmin, and he went back home to his father. And his father said to him, "Do you know who you are?" And the boy said, "Well, they never covered that in school." And the father said, "Well," he says, you seemed pretty egotistical when you came home and told me how much you knew." He says, "That's not good." He says, "Do you know who you are?" And the boy said, "Well, I don't know what you mean." And the father said, "Do you know who you are?" And the boy tried to answer him with his name, and the father said, "No, do you know who you are?" So finally the boy admitted. He says, "Well, I don't know how to answer your question." And the father said, "Well, go back to your guru and tell him that you don't know who you are, and your father will not let you home until you do." So the boy did. And the guru said to him, he says, "I've taught you everything that I can teach you." He says, "Discovering who you are," he says, "is something I can't do for you. It's something you have to do for yourself. But what I can do is I can give you a technique." He said, "I want you to take the herd of cows. There's 400 cows in the herd. And I want you to go live in the forest with the cows until the cows have multiplied and there are 1,000 cows. And don't come back before there are 1,000 cows. But I want you to observe the cows. And I want you to become a cow." And the boy didn't know what it meant, but he took the cows and he went to the forest. And he watched the cows. And the cows just were. They were just cows. They did what cows do. They ate, they walked around, they mooed, drank water, did all the things that cows do. But without much fanfare, without any apparent thought. And after a while of being alone, with no one to talk to, just the cows, the boy stopped thinking in language. He stopped thinking in words. He stopped wondering how to express himself. He stopped having dialogues. You know, we have these imaginary dialogues in our mind. We keep talking about these things. It's all stopped. And he became more and more like the cows. He was just there. He just watched them. They watched him. And according to the story, he even lost the ability to count. There was no need for him to count anymore. So he had no idea when the herd reached 1,000. But it was the cows who came to him and indicated that now was the time to go back. So he went back to the guru. And the guru told the other students, he said, "Go count the cows and see how many there are." Because the young man couldn't count. He just stood there amongst the cows as if he was one of them. Silent, with his eyes wide open, observing everything, being aware of everything, but releasing all opinions, all ideas, all attachments, all needs for the way that things must be. He had found himself. It was time to go home. So I encourage you this week to find what works for you, to try different ways that work for you, to make it a priority to dedicate some time to just being alone, to letting your thoughts wind down. Don't expect it to happen in one setting or two settings or three settings. Make it a priority to know yourself, not your name, not your title, not your religion, not your job, not your marital status, not your gender, but who are you? Who are you? I hope that someday we just get to the point where we can answer, I am. That's all I can say. I am. The rest is an attachment. The rest is an identity. The rest doesn't matter. I am. And so it is.